What's the scariest encounter you've had with a total stranger?
I was once driving in the country and it was pouring rain in the dead of night. So hard that I was driving very slowly and couldn't see any of the signs before GPS. I mean, I had never been in rain this heavy. I had to pull over to the side of the road to try and see the sign to see if I was going in the right direction. I didn't get out due to the rain, so was craning my neck forward to try and make out where I was when suddenly the passenger door opened and a man got inside the car, sat down and looked at me. Here is South Africa, there is a fair amount of violent crime and hijackings, so I instinctively started panicking and yelling and screaming at the top of my lungs, flailing my arms to try and do something, anything to stop this guy from attacking me. He started screaming as well in terror and jumped out the car. I quickly leant over and closed the passenger door and sped off down the road. I was breathing so heavily at this point and trying my best to calm down, nearly in tears. I kept replaying it in my head the whole time, and suddenly remembered that the man smiled at me. It suddenly dawned on me that it was probably a hitchhiker that I hadn't seen, who thought that I was pulling over to give him a lift. Only to be greeted by me screaming and trying to hit him. Was probably his scariest encounter with a stranger as well.
Greater than kept replaying it in my head the whole time, and suddenly remember that the man smiled at me. It suddenly dawned on me that it was probably a hitchhiker that I hadn't seen, who thought that I was pulling over to give him a lift. Only to be greeted by me screaming and trying to hit him. Was probably his scariest encounter with a stranger as well. Or maybe he made a mistake and got into the wrong car since it was raining so heavily? Speaking from personal experience here, facepalm,
My story is not quite the same as most. Years ago I used to work as an ecological surveyor. Basically I got paid to take long walks in the Peak District National Park here in the UK and note down all the plant species I saw. I was walking down a trail one morning along the edge of a woodland when suddenly about 8 of the bushes stood up and produced rifles. I nearly pooed myself and they were laughing like hell. It was a bunch of British Army guys on a camouflage and concealment exercise and they had been following me to practice. Apparently I had nearly trodden on one of them earlier as he was hiding right by the trail. We all ended up sitting around talking about football for a bit. Nice bunch of guys but very scary indeed.
I was traveling home to California and I was in Nevada. It was an emergency, so I'd packed and left at around midnight. It was about 5:30 am or so in rural Nevada. I was at a stop on my usual route. I was very familiar with the particular stop, and it was just an hour or so before the California border. Being a lone female, I concealed carry. I have my extended permit which allowed concealed through several states, except California, and I was at my truck at an empty spot, and I was in the cab disassembling and putting away my gun to be in compliance. Stepped out to go to the restroom and someone had managed to get close to my truck and was hiding along the passenger side, and I didn't know it until I'd walked past them. Whoever it was grabbed me from behind. I let out the loudest, most blood-curdling scream. Oscar-winning scream. But there was no other people at this stop. I fought and tried to buck the guy off of me, but I wasn't doing very well. Kicking lead him to lift me off the ground where I couldn't get him, and trying to break through his arms made him bend me over with him still behind me. I'm not sure how long I was screaming and fighting, but then I heard tires screech and I figured it was the creepy van my parents told me to avoid as a kid coming to take me away. Nope. It was a Toyota Corolla full of local teenagers headed to the gas station before school. The teens jumped out and ran towards us, and the driver stayed in the vehicle. The guy who grabbed me took off. 2 of the kids chased him through the desert beyond the gas station on foot, and the driver and the other kid made sure I was alright. I send these 4 boys Christmas and birthday cards every year. I'm sure if it wasn't for them I would have been kidnapped or killed. Josh, Austin, Mason, and James, thank you guys.
When I was about 6 I was with my family at an incredibly crowded street festival we'd go to every year. I remember we had stopped to watch a band play for a minute or two, and then my mum, I assumed, took my hand and we continued walking. After a few seconds I realized the hand I was holding was puffy and hot, and my mum's hands were always cool and more slender, so I knew it wasn't her hand I was holding. I looked up to see a woman with long blonde hair and sunglasses grinning down at me. I said, "You're not my mum," and she just laughed and said, "That's okay, you can come with me anyway." Obviously my mum and dad had realized I was not with them at this point and were freaking out. My dad just happened to look in the exact right direction at the right time and saw this lady leading me away through a break in the crowd. He ran over to us, grabbed her shoulder, and she dropped my hand and disappeared in the crowd. I still can't believe he spotted us. It was like shoulder to shoulder people at this thing.
Same thing happened to me at an amusement park. Only noticed it when I heard my mum scream for me. Looked up at someone I've never seen before. She let me go to my mum, thank God.
It's a mix of the scariest and the best. I was 11, and at the park with my cousin who was 3. My cousin, being a stubborn 3-year-old, told me to leave him be, and I sat out on the bench. I was just reading my book, and occasionally looking up, until this like 50-something-year-old man sat down next to me, and just started talking. He asked me, which kid was mine, like 4 times, even after I made it quite clear I was uncomfortable, and then he gets all close to me, and was like, "Do you want another one?" So I started freaking out, until this homeless man, who I later knew to be Marty, pulled me off the bench, and told him that he was lucky he didn't pop his jaw, and told me to go home. I'm glad Marty showed up, because I don't know what I would have done. Update: Marty says hello.
Which kid is yours? Sir, I am also a child.
Marty is a legend.
He was great.
I dropped my son off at school one morning and then went to the grocery store with my infant daughter. It was so early, there was only 1 or 2 other customers. There was an older man with a walker that I didn't really pay too much attention to that kept popping up in the same aisle as us. I got out to my car and put my groceries in and then was putting my daughter in her car seat when the man came up behind me. He asked me a question, and when I turned to answer he shoved his walker into the back of my legs, pinning me against my car inside the open door. I tried moving around but couldn't go anywhere except forward, and he started pushing me down to the floor of my car. I was so scared that once he had me down there he was going to go for my daughter, so I threw myself over her so my whole upper body was in her car seat and wedged myself in tight, trying to cover as much of her as possible. He grabbed me by the hair and was trying to pull me up when someone started honking their car horn. Another mom had been sitting in her car with her own baby asleep and had seen what was happening. Another car pulled up behind mine and the man ran over and got in quickly, obviously never needing the walker. The police were called, but the plates on the car that he left in were stolen, so as far as I know he was never found. I, 21F at the time, was in a store picking up some items for my house when I noticed a man was literally peeking at me from around a corner. I first brushed it off and continued my shopping, but was aware that this man was following me around the store. He then sang out to me and said I looked familiar and asked if I went to the local university. I didn't, so I said no. At this point I got creeped out, so I checked out and went to my car. I heard footsteps behind me and knew he had followed me, so I just jumped in my car and locked the doors. It was dark, so I hadn't noticed him go around the back of my car until he banged on my passenger window. I ignored him and started the car. This prompted him to run around the front and start banging on my driver's side door, trying to open it and asking me for a ride. I was terrified and just pulled out of the parking space as fast as I could and drove off, with him chasing my car until I rounded a corner. I have no idea what his plan was, but to this day I am nervous about dark parking lots at night.
A helpful tip: if you ever find yourself in this situation again, hopefully not, ask one of the workers, or the security guards in the store to escort you to your car or help you load your groceries. It makes me feel a million times safer if I'm by myself or it's dark.
I say this not just to you, but to everyone. If you think someone is following you, for goodness sake, please don't leave a more populated area for a less populated one. If you're in a store, find a manager or security person, let them know you fear you're being followed. Describe the person, and then ask for someone to walk you to your car. Most businesses will be happy to oblige.
When I was around 10 to 11, a friend invited me to a water park. During swimming at a wave pool, he found some random kid around our age and decided to tell this kid that the game we were going to play was hold me down in the water. I didn't get that memo, so I thought him and this kid were just trying to drown me. This went on for what felt like an hour of me swimming away and hiding. I didn't hang out with him afterward. Same trip. After we were done with the pool, I got to the changing rooms and there is a couple people in there. Old man on the bench asks me if I wanted him to help me change. I just said, no thanks, and quickly changed and ran out.
This was scary for me to read, because around your age I was at a water park with a wave pool. A good friend of mine invited me. We were swimming around and got separated, and this buff guy swam up to me, put his hands on my shoulders, and pushed me down under the water. He wasn't letting go. I was in disbelief, tried to push my way back up. He was probably 3x as strong as me. Because I was surprised and struggling, I was running out of breath quickly. I felt myself giving up. At this point, the guy stopped pushing me down and let me surface. I looked into his face and he laughed like a crazy person. A wave came and he swam into a crowd of people. I got the F out of there and haven't gone in a wave pool since. Never told my friend, but I told my parents and a therapist years later. I'm now 27 and it's no surprise that my number one fear is being murdered by a stranger.
I am still unsure how the whole hold people underwater is fun. I stopped hanging out with that kid after that. I don't need to know if he was going to try and go farther with something else.
Pedo down the street tried to lure my sister and I to his house while we were walking down the street. We started ignoring him. On the way back, he threatened us and we went to my landlord's house to call the police. Guy got arrested shortly after but was bailed out. His dad was a sex offender and there had already been multiple complaints about him from other parents. Glad my sister and I were smart enough not to engage with him and to get help right away.
I am late to the party here, but I was once threatened by a man with a scoped rifle while walking my dog. I was out in a field behind my apartment building at night, and I heard a voice from behind me say, "You better run fast, boy." I turned and saw a backlight silhouette of a man on a balcony with a scoped rifle, and I heard him close the bolt. I decided that running would only add tension to the situation, so I yanked on my dog's leash while calmly yet quickly walking towards the closest cover I could find. I immediately called 911, and when it was all said and done, the guy with the rifle claimed he was just showing the rifle to his friend. BS, but I couldn't prove otherwise.
That's effing terrifying. F that guy. Not scary per se but deeply disturbing. Random dude at my local library accosted me while I was enjoying a new sci-fi novel and was absolutely convinced I was his son. Kept telling me he was sorry and he never meant to kill my mother, who he called Pink, and said some other heinous poo I won't describe. Bat poo crazy, but he sounded so rational and calm the whole time. Poo gave me the creeps for a long time after.
Hey, I also call people colors when I'm on a psychotic mania trip. Swore to God that might have been me if instead of a library it was a bar in Bangkok. I was taking a shower in the bathroom of the walkout basement. My 3-year-old son was upstairs with my mother eating breakfast. I heard him open the door and told him, "Mommy is in the shower, you have to wait." The door didn't close but he didn't respond either, so I asked him to go back upstairs and ask Grandma for whatever he needed. Instead I see a shadow and outline of a hand touching the shower curtain and realize that there is an adult in the bathroom, not my son. I scream and punch through the shower curtain. I don't think I connected, but I heard the man run out anyway. As fast as I could I jumped out and grabbed a towel to check on my son and mom. At the same time my mom was coming downstairs to see if I was okay from the scream. The man never went upstairs and they didn't even know it had happened. The walkout basement door and window were open. I called the police and they didn't find him, just my empty wallet about a block away. They did come back to me a few weeks later to let me know that they caught a guy in the area raping women at gunpoint and they think it was the same guy. Never been so scared in my life. The most visceral part for me was knowing he was just standing quietly in the bathroom while I talked to him like he was my son. Honestly, I don't know why, but that creeps me out the most. It felt really violating at the time.
Jesus, how are some people so terrible? This whole post is too full, just how?
I was about 19 and driving home from dinner one night, probably a ribeye sandwich from the local truck stop, because those were cheap and excellent. A woman standing next to a motorcycle at the side of the road waved me down, so I stopped. She said that she'd run out of gas, and that she didn't want to scare me, but her boyfriend was hiding down over the bank . Uh-oh, this giant comes up over the bank in dusty road leathers. He's a damn mountain of denim, leather, and hair. Pooh. Fake damsel in distress, I'm an idiot. I was so close to home I felt safe, maybe? Maybe I can leg it home. Surely he's too big to be fast? The giant apologizes for hiding, but we ran out of gas, and there was no way anyone was going to stop on an empty road to help with me standing here. He's embarrassed. Now I felt a little guilty for agreeing with him. He's intimidating as hell without putting any effort into it. He doesn't have to. We're out of sight and isolated on a secondary road, but it's less than a mile to I-80. I can almost see my house from where I'm standing. It gets boring from there. I tell him I've got a can of gas for the lawnmower with at least a gallon left in it. He says he can go 70 miles on that. The truck stop is 2-3 miles up the interstate, and is happy to pay for it. I'm home and back in 2 minutes. He insists on paying me $10 for a $2 gallon of gas because I'm not sure I'd have come back if I were you. There was just that 15 seconds of ice cold, slow motion terror between the girlfriend saying she didn't want to scare me, who says that, and the mountain coming up over that bank and apologizing.
I pulled over to help a lady with a flat tire one night in West Texas. While talking to her and showing her how to change the tire, I heard a sneeze come from the dark bushes off the shoulder. Out of habit, I said bless you, and heard a thanks come back from the magical talking bush. I shot her a confused look, and she face-palmed and sheepishly explained that the man in the bush was her husband, and he didn't want to scare me off to help with the tire. I asked why he didn't change it, and she let it slip that he was wanted by U.S. Marshals. I finished up, and she offered me $100 to keep quiet. I figured $100 for me to forget was a good deal, so I accepted and left. 15 minutes down the road, 6 Texas troopers went flying by the other way. Hope they don't think I snitched.
14 years old, walking home. It was dark. Man gets off the bus, opens up his coat and says, "Like what you see?" He was in his 40s. Completely naked. I've never run so fast in my life.
But like surely the dumbest question ever, obviously not.
This happened to a friend and me in college. I was walking with her home at like 9 or so. We were maybe 20-ish. Guy walks up to us and he did that, opened his jacket and was like what you see? I completely stunned this was happening, stood there and didn't say anything. Her, maybe 5'2" little mousy-like girl didn't hesitate and was like, hell no, you're DKS small, your gut sticks out and you just have one of the nastiest bodies I've ever seen. I couldn't believe it. She just started ripping into his body, destroying the man. The guy couldn't believe it either, not the response he was used to. He closed his jacket and crossed the street and took off at a good pace. She kept yelling after him, told him to come back when he had something worth showing. I was dying laughing so hard. She didn't even know what came over her. Edit, thanks Redditors for the awards.
I was in high school and worked at a truck stop. One night a trucker came in and stared at me for a long time. Wherever I moved to he was staring me down. I told him that if he needed anything that he would need to come to the counter and order it. He just grunted and kept staring. I'm not a small person and at that time I was in football, wrestling, and track. I was also at the gym 6 days a week. I was 190 pounds of muscle and teenager hormones. But the vibes I was getting from this guy were making me nervous. I called up my other coworker and told them I was going to be in the freezer for a while. So I was stocking the freezers and coolers for a while and then went to the bathroom. As I entered the bathroom, the trucker jumped up and walked in behind me and just stood in there while I took a piss and washed my hands. As soon as I got out, I grabbed the trash bags and beelined outside to take care of the trash at the pumps until he left. My coworker asked me why the trucker kept following me after I finally came in. I had no idea why. He never said anything, didn't order anything, just filled up his semi and creeped on me. I've never been as creeped out by a person as I was with that guy. Edit. Thanks for the awards, kind strangers.
A very cheerful guy approached me and my friend in a park, in a very non-threatening way. He was holding a frisbee and explained he was putting together an impromptu game of ultimate frisbee and looking for people to join him. Which was fine, but then he tried to grab me by the throat. It was such a sudden change of mood. My friend, an athletic dude, fortunately, got between us and just stared him down and he ran away. The whole thing was just bizarre.
Wanna play? Sure. F you, now you die. I wonder what his deal was.
Somewhere in that conversation he also talked about how he had to pee. Which was also really weird.
Many years ago, I, 21F, was waiting in line outside of a nightclub with a couple of my friends. We were happily chatting with some other guy in line for a bit. Suddenly his mood changed and he just shoved me by my throat. I fell on my ass and the bouncer was on him in seconds. While the bouncer had the guy pinned down on his stomach, the guy was staring at me and screaming "F you" over and over at me. We were just casually making small talk 1 second and the next second he was so violent. I assume he was on DG, drunk, or mentally ill. Freaky.
I was at a storage depot with my ex, picking up some stuff or other. Suddenly and without warning, this old-ish guy approaches out of nowhere and starts a conversation with my ex. I'm in the unit at the time, so it's possible he didn't know I was there, but the clipped tone and monosyllabic answers from my ex were enough for me to know he was making her feel uncomfortable. That's when I heard him say, "Don't worry, I'm not going to RP you or anything." Like, literally 2 or 3 sentences into a conversation with a total stranger, he felt this would be a reassurance? So I stepped out of the unit, making my presence known by moving some stuff around in the hall, and his whole demeanor changed. Somewhere between contrition and aggression that I dared insert myself into whatever the F he thought this was. My ex stayed back while I kept the old bastard's attention on me, and he took me to task for calling him mate, a common thing British people do when they don't know someone's name, saying it was rude and disrespectful to a stranger. I responded with, "As rude and disrespectful as talking about RP to a young woman you thought was alone?" He shuffled away, mumbling something about knowing the management, leaving us both a little shook. To this day, I have no idea what his damage was, but it was clear that he wasn't used to being confronted like that. God knows what he would have done if my ex had been alone.
Something very similar happened to me while at work. I work in an adult store, typically alone. When I was about 2 months in, this guy comes in and right away I noticed something was off about this guy. He started asking me to help him find P, which we aren't allowed to do for safety reasons, as most of our DVD section has no camera coverage and management at the time forbid us from going back there with customers. I refused to help this guy find his jerk-off material, and he goes, "What? It's not like I'm going to RP you." He walks away and then comes back up to me less than a minute later, asking for help with a product this time. I go over and tell him about this product. Out of nowhere, he asks me how much I weigh. I said, "Oh, I'm not sure, probably 210 to 220. He goes, "No way. I don't believe you," and he wraps his arms around me way too tightly and lifts me up off the ground. I had to literally beg this guy to put me down, and he didn't until I said, "Please, I have a bad back problem." I was beside myself and fully panicking, so I beelined it for the counter and waited for him to leave a few minutes later. I called my manager in tears. I was a mess. I've only seen him twice since then, and I kicked him out for stealing.
According to people who study violence and escalation, it's likely he would have tried to RP her. People who say, "I'm not going to do this harmful thing to you," are generally telling you exactly what they are going to do to you. Edit. Several people have asked, so I'm just gonna go ahead and put the info up here as well. The Gift of Fear is a book by Gavin de Becker, and I recommend it to anyone who wants to get a better understanding of red flag behavior, the escalation of violence, and how to trust one's own gut instincts. Especially for women dating men, this book is a lifesaver. Thanks for the gold.
My feelings exactly. But to then have the gall to object to how he was addressed afterwards. I was getting froggy, I'll admit.
Went to a yard sale with my aunt when I was like 5. A little boy, about the same age as me, approaches me and tells me to come inside to meet his dad. I wander off with him without my aunt noticing, and he brings me into the house where the yard sale is taking place. We go down to the basement and there was his naked dad, lying on a couch excitedly greeting me as if he'd been awaiting my company or something. I actually don't remember much after that. I just got out of there as fast as possible and it's been a strange memory of mine ever since.
I hope that little boy is doing okay.
Well, that's scary as poo. I'm glad you were able to get away, but geez Louise, that poor boy. Frowning face.
Back when I was 16 working at Lowe's, some customer who was an old man walked up behind me without me even noticing and whispered in my ear, "Do you know where I can find the hoses at?" He said that so close to my ear where I could feel his warm breath while he was caressing my shoulder. My body froze up and all I could say was, "I think they're in aisle 5. Welp, shortly after I found out that he never even went to that end of the store where they were. Lol.
He was probably asking you, "Where the hose at?" Something I get asked by my friends constantly.
I had just left my apartment to go for a walk down towards the beach at night when it was pitch black. There was a park along the way. Some guy came up to me asking to use my phone. I apologized and lied and said I didn't have one. He didn't believe me and started to get aggressive. He asked me where I lived and if I had a boyfriend. He started following me and that's when I started to run and went back to my place. I didn't feel comfortable going where I wanted to.
It's always creepy when someone asks me for my phone.
Walking to my friend's house the last day of 8th grade. Old lady pulled her car next to me, almost cutting off my walking path. I backed away because WTF. She called out to me that she liked my hair. Then she said that her hair used to be my color until she got RPD. You'd better believe my little chunky butt ran to my friend's house and told her parents.
What is it with people and hair? Like the number of people that just come up to you and start touching your hair. Just no, please.
I was 16 and sitting on a train station with my mother. Some man came over and started talking to her. After a while I looked at the clock and informed my mother that we needed to go because our train was about to arrive. He flew up from the seat and started screaming at me and wanted to fight me. My mother was confused and tried to explain to him that I was her daughter and that we really did need to leave. He just continued screaming, which of course made teenage me scream back at him. She had to pull me away from there. I never understood what made him see red like that. All I did was inform my mother our train was coming and we needed to leave.
Some guy started yelling at me on a bus in Greek one time when I wouldn't make conversation with him, calling me a W and presumably a bunch of other rude things. When I tried to pass him to go to another seat, he kicked me in the back. He wasn't drunk or high as far as I could tell. Some people are just psychopaths.
You were obviously trying to take her away from me.
My mom's married. Hands off, dude. I don't want a new dad.
Only passenger in a train car in Europe late at night. A disheveled man, wild hair and beard, tagged sweater entered the car and started pacing up and down the aisle. He is talking to himself in a language I couldn't understand. Every few trips he would stop in front of me and yell at me in whatever language he spoke. I would try to respond, but he didn't know English any more than I understood whatever language he was speaking. He would eventually give up yelling at me and would go back to pacing the aisle and talking to himself. This went on for hours. Really wish I could have recorded him back then so I could eventually find someone to translate it.
I think interactions get 10x scarier when you can't understand what the other person is saying.
Sounds like he might have had a mental condition. You can always tell the train guard about people making you feel uncomfortable.
I will never forget it. When Ghostbusters 2 came out, I wanted to see it. My mum took me to the local theater. I think I was around 9. I needed to use the bathroom, so I ran down the small hall and turned the corner. When I saw a much older man come out of the bathroom. When he saw me, he stopped, went back in. When I didn't move, he opened the door, peeking his head and arm out, motioning me to come towards him. I probably looked like a deer in headlights. I didn't move. It was frozen until he said, come on in." Panic rushed over me and I ran back towards my mum, who said I was pale white. She quickly left the theater with me and went home. Stranger danger worked out that day in the 80s. I can still picture him, or at least the picture my brain made of this memory. Edit, sorry I can't get to everyone's questions, but I truly thank you for sharing your stories. I had no idea how common this was for little kids. I am so glad most, if not all of you, ran back to safety. It saddens me for the kids that didn't have that instinct. No kid deserves to be scared or coerced by another adult, regardless of intentions. In the 80s, kids were left alone more. We were left at amusement park as teens, kids at mall arcades. It is just how it was. Without the internet, you never knew what was outside the general area of coverage unless it was extreme and made it to national news. Today we know what could be lurking behind open doors, vans, and corners, but that doesn't make it any better. It's still scary, and I am glad more kids are watched more closely, not left alone, etc. Be safe, and please, after reading all these comments, teach your kids stranger danger and drill it in their heads. Edit 2, thank you for all of the awards and all the stories. Although, hearing all these stories reminds me that it can be very scary out there. Keep safe and healthy, everyone. Thank you, everyone.
A similar thing happened to me when I was 10 at a D-store. I was reading a comic when a man who looked like Santa started talking to me. He had duct tape and paper towels in his cart. I remember 'cause I spent a lot of time in there and never knew they had carts. He asked if I could come to his apartment across the street and help him move some boxes. I told him I'd have to ask my mom. Then he leaned in and quietly added that he had some penthouses I could have in exchange. I immediately stood up, walked over to the counter and told the lady what he said. He hustled out while she was dialing security. I don't think they caught him, but they had him on security cam. Edit. I also remember exactly what he looked like. His white shoes, flooded pants, light striped button-down short-sleeved shirt with suspenders, his too tight watch and oddly thin wedding band. I hope I see him again one day.
ROMG, hell no. This is definitely the creepiest one I have read so far.
Me and my siblings were walking across the road to a gas station. We frequently went there to grab snacks and such, and then we leave and go for a walk down a road behind it. Well, a car starts following us with its headlights off, so I quickly dip, telling my siblings to follow me. So we start running through a field and lay on the ground to wait for them to leave. Well, they drive down the road and then circle back. This happens about 4 to 5 times before they gave up and we went home.
Jesus, that's effing horrifying. Glad you guys got out of that safely.
I was walking home from the bus stop after school. About 15 years old. It was really not far, but there were construction workers drinking on the side of the road. One of them got up and followed me home, calling suggestive things. I honestly can't remember what, but his intentions were clear. This was about 200 meters from home, so I sprint home. We have an automatic gate, so I realize he will catch me if I wait for it to open, or he'll follow me in. So I climb over, which is normally not easy, but that day I flew over. I was really shaken up. For me, this story is actually about what happened next, which is that I called my mum, who had an intense job. She dropped everything at work, came home immediately, made me hot chocolate and pancakes. We had a long conversation where she validated my feelings and fear. She's the best.
Your mum is amazing.
I was about 10, getting back home from the park with my sister. She, being the stubborn younger, I need no older sister playing mom to me, sibling, walked purposely 20 meters ahead so nobody would even think we were together. She rounds the corner, and I hear a blood-curdling scream. I never covered 20 meters so fast in my life. I round the corner and there's a man, holding my sister by her throat, dragging her into an open car parked nearby. When he sees me advancing and yelling incomprehensibly, I honestly don't know what I yelled. I was scared out of my wits. And he realizes there's 2 of us, he drops her, jumps into the car and drives off. She had fingerprint-shaped bruises on her throat for days.
Holy moly, just reading this is scary.
Yeah, it's been 3 decades and I have this panicky reaction to this day when I'm out with the kids and they run ahead and round the corner. I'm instantly yelling at them to keep closer to me where I can see them.
This is why you always walk with someone.
Yup, and my sister hated it, being constantly told by my parents that we have to walk together when we're playing outside. She was your typical bratty, obstinate younger sibling that will do anything just to spite you, so of course she took off every effing time. I have a heart defect and can't run for very long, and she knew that. Also, I guess it embarrassed her in front of her friends being nannied by her older sibling. I was also a fatty and thoroughly uncool. But after this incident she was done putting distance between us for a while.
I was 19 and I was sleeping with the window open since it was a hot summer night. My BF and I were both knocked out, but all of a sudden I wake up, just opened my eyes, didn't get up, and I had a horrible gut feeling and just an overwhelming feeling that I was being watched. I turn to my side and I see someone's head sticking in from the window. Needless to say, I had a heart attack, and as soon as they heard me get up they left. Edit, thank you everyone for the upvotes and awards. This actually the first time I've ever gotten any award on here, so I am very grateful. Hopefully to anyone reading this and some of the stories in the comments you learn to be always be careful and close your window. You never who might be trying to take a peek inside.
Kind of similar. I once got up in the middle of the night and went to the bathroom, when I noticed a weird noise outside. For reference, I live in a small village, and although there are other houses, there's empty land in between, covered in waist-high vegetation. I open up the bathroom window, look outside, and there's a dude there. Squatting, almost like as if he was taking a poo, but occasionally moved slowly, and that's the sound I was hearing, him moving through the brush. For a second I didn't know what to do. He could have been a robber, possibly armed, and could easily shoot at me from the window. Despite that, I ended up yelling at him, "Get the F out of there." He panicked and ran towards the forest at the back of my house. My dog sensed him and kept barking, even 10 or 15 minutes after the encounter, so I was afraid he was still around and called the police. They came, searched the area for a bit and said they couldn't see anything. Didn't sleep too well that night, but nothing worse ever came of it. I still think he must have been surveying the area, either looking into robbing us or the house on the other side of the patch, but fortunately nothing ever happened.
Holy poo, this one scares me the most.
I'm 14 and was all alone in a dirt path in India, and some guy was just sitting on a rock in the middle of the forest. I didn't make eye contact, but I could see he was crying. I wanted to help, but my gut told me not to. 3 days later was caught for murdering his wife and 5-year-old daughter.
Damn bro, good one for going with your gut.
Gee, this one really got me. How awful.
When I was a young girl, my mum would take me to see every Harry Potter movie in theater when they came out. I kind of grew up with them at the same age as the characters, as did many 90s-born millennials. This had to be the second or third in the series as it was around 2003. About halfway into the movie, I need to go to the bathroom. On my way back from the bathroom, just outside the door to the theater, there stands a scraggly, dirty-looking man with a blue ball cap. His hand is extended outwards to me as if I'm supposed to grab it. He asks me, "Do you want to come with me, little girl?" The heaviest pit dropped in my tummy and I felt a general energy of extreme danger. Thankfully, my mum had been very diligent in teaching me some stranger danger street smarts, so I just ran as fast as I could back into the theater and planted my ass back in my seat beside my mum. She could tell something had shaken me bad. She kept asking what was wrong and I wouldn't tell her. By the time I did tell her, half hour or more passed. She took me to the theater staff, where a 16-year-old girl listened to my story and phoned the police. The police did not find him on site. I waited too long to tell anyone. I have a lot of guilt and regret towards my not saying something about it as soon as it happened. I worry that some other little girl went with him that day as a result of my inaction. Of course I had some sense of his deprived and disgusting motives then, but now that I'm older, I know that he most likely planned to do very disgusting and pedophilic things. What does a 40-year-old man want to do with an 8-year-old girl? I will never forget his face.
When my daughter turned 1, we went on a trip to Hawaii. When we were sitting in the airport waiting to check in for our tickets, a man approached me and started commenting on how beautiful my daughter was. Fine, thanks, but it didn't stop there. He stood over me and continued to try and touch her and ask about her age, birthday, favorite things, where we were going, etc. I refused to answer, but he refused to move and we were trapped. My husband came back and the man stepped away pretty quick. I told airport security, but they didn't do anything. We got to our gate and a few minutes later, the same man sat and positioned himself where he could watch our daughter. If we moved seats, he kept her in his sight. I mentioned it to the gate agent who brushed it off again. We got on the plane, and he managed to also be on the plane in a seat he could keep an eye on her. He kept smiling at her and getting up to walk the aisles and pass her. My husband got up and he came and said in baby talk, "I found out where you're going, didn't I?" I reported it to the flight attendant, who was not messing around. He was forced to switch seats and not allowed to get up again. Upon landing there were people waiting for him that he was forced to go with, security or airport staff, IDK, but we didn't see him again. I am 100% certain our daughter would have been kidnapped, trafficked if we had not been on high alert and reported him. That was 2 years ago and I still remember how terrified I was.
I'm glad someone finally took you seriously. That flight attendant was on his per game.
Older woman approached me on campus asking me to take her to this spot in town since she doesn't know where it is. I say no, it was a new city for me too, and she gave vibes. She insists it's right around the corner so it's not that far, so suddenly she knows where it is. I refuse and she hesitates and then walks off. An older guy asks if she needs directions only for her to walk by him. I just thought it was strange, but I didn't really think about it. The next week, I check my phone when I get to class and someone posted an article about how this older woman, who was tied to multiple cases of human trafficking, was just caught by the police in a nearby town. From the description alone, I knew it was the woman I had talked to.
Something almost identical happened to me when I was a teenager. I was walking home and a middle-aged woman stopped her car and in broken English asked me for directions to a nearby location. I gave her verbal directions that she showed no indication she was processing. Then she asked me to just get in and she would bring me back later. I refused. She insisted. I apologized and refused again, then left. I've been telling this story for years because I thought it was bizarre. Not once has it occurred to me that it could have been a human trafficking operation until I read your story.
Your story makes me wonder about mine, too. Very similar, but approached at a gas station. Although the vibes of the woman made me more think she was on DG of some sort. The fun part, though, is after I kept telling her I couldn't give her a ride, she finally looked at my vehicle, saw government plates, freaked out and ran off. If that wasn't an extra big clue to her being shady.
My mother was a lifelong abuser, but in the early days she merely had a habit. As time went on she became more unscrupulous, stealing from dealers and such. One day, Mum asks me to give her a ride to a friend's house. This should have set off red flags for me, but for some reason didn't, and sure enough, as soon as we arrived, the dealer comes outside and yells at her but promptly brandishes a gun and points it at me. I figured from context clues that if he couldn't stop her directly, maybe he could hit her where it hurts by killing her son? Edit, a lot of people are asking what happened next. Honestly, I'd been dealing with my mum's addictions my entire life, so at some point I stopped being scared and started being defiant. So this extended to having a gun in my face. I started yelling back, though I don't remember exactly what I said, but the next step involved putting the car in reverse and speeding the hell out of there. I realized that being defiant kind of kills the scariest moment of my life until I clarify that once my adrenaline wore off, I probably could have poo my pants.
WTF had happened next?
At the age of 14 to 15, I was walking my dog in a forest. I ran into a large guy who told me he had failed to report back to his mental hospital, but I should not be afraid. He told me about visiting the purgatory and how painful that was, and said hell was specifically 1,000 times more painful. He gave me colorful details, like something out of Bosch or the Hindu Book of the Dead. He begged me to pray for him, which I said yes, of course to. Incidentally, my school gym in those days was located on the opposite side of the road from a mental hospital, and they'd release them for a walk every now and then. We'd run into them on our way to the gym from school. It was a bit eerie but okay since we were in a group, and it was in a city. Being outside of civilization and alone with that guy was terrifying. He wasn't harmful and let me go, but it was deeply uncomfortable.
About 10 years ago, I was taking my girlfriend at the time home around midnight, on very rural backroad in North Gaw. I was half asleep at the wheel when this lady runs out from the woods in front of my truck screaming, "Help me." I slammed on my brakes and rolled my window halfway down as I'm realizing she's covered in blood and mud and sticks and wasn't right. She reached her hands into my cab and grabbed my neck as hard as she could. I took off just a little down the road and found a crowd of distraught people outside their house and figured it was probably related. They asked if I've seen anyone and I told them she almost got run over. Well, she had been released from an asylum that day and had stabbed her mother. She showed me the wood on her shoulder. Later I drove back by and there were a dozen police cars lit up at the house. Creepy.
15 years old on a school trip in London. Shady guy walks up next to me in the subway and staring intently at me. He pushes his thigh against my leg and I feel a little sting, then I look down and see he is hiding a knife in his pocket. I just froze and he stood there for another few seconds before he walked away, presumably to terrorize someone else. Must have been some meth head but scared the living poo out of this pimply teenager. I was a teen working in a cinema. After cleaning and locking up I had to go by the bank and deliver the cash to a bank box, any amount between 2 to 8k euros. One day I was locking the front door. There's a pub on their other side of the alley. It was a busy night so there was way more cash than usual. I come from a Scandinavian town that is not too busy. But sometimes in the summer it can get pretty crowded. I was a little nervous because I had so much money on me. I'm a little paranoid. All of a sudden a man in a jokingly voice says, "Hands up and give me the money." I got so visibly scared that he excused himself. He then leaves laughing. Probably drunk. Man, I got scared. For some people wondering what I was doing with so much money, I knew the owners very well and they thought nobody would expect the teen that cleans up popcorn to carry the cash. TLDR. Had way too much cash on me, in a semi-dark alley.
I was staying at a motel out of town. I was in my room on the bed in my underwear watching TV. Next thing I know the door opens and a guy walks halfway in. He stops and we just kinda look at each other. I'm freaking out internally. I was 20 and a mama's boy and rarely went anywhere by myself. I didn't know if this was a robbery or a murder. I was completely stuck in fear. He looks at me and mumbles, "WTF?" He looks at the door number, then his keycard, then back at the door number. Then he goes, "They told me my room was 223. I clear the fear in my throat enough to go, "I've been here all day, you might wanna go tell them there is a mistake." He nods and closes the door and leaves. I'm 40 now and the second I get in motel I deadbolt and chain the door.
To be fair, it has happened to me before that hotel staff have given me keys to rooms that are already occupied. Awkward experience for everyone involved.
When I lived in halls of residence we didn't lock our doors because you already had to get through 2 locked doors to get to our flat. We trusted each other, and it was too easy to lock yourself out of your room otherwise. My flatmate was having a party one night and two very drunk girls came stumbling into my room, where I was eating ice cream in bed watching Howl's Moving Castle. We stared at each other for a long time. I think I scared them more than they scared me. I locked my door whenever there were parties after that.
I was probably 16, sitting at home alone on the computer when I looked up and saw a man on my back patio looking at the windows and heading towards the door. I have no idea what came over my stupid teen girl mind, but I opened the door and firmly told him to leave. It felt like the voice that came out of me was not mine. It was guttural and deep and grounded, which was the opposite of how I felt. He looked at me and didn't move. He wasn't shocked, it was sort of like he was trying to challenge me or scare me by holding his ground. I said leave one more time with the same voice and he backed up. He said, I was just looking for paint, and I responded, I'm about to start looking for my dad's gun. My divorced dad did not live with us, nor was there a gun in the house. Lol. I slammed the door, locked it, and went to call 911. They found the guy breaking into another house down the street. Thank God. I got to go pick him out of a lineup and everything. Still one of my scariest moments and possibly one of stupidest moments in my life.
This guy consciously planned on robbing a house and all he could come up with was looking for paint? Genius.
But also very badass.
Most recent one was at Lowe's near my house. Some dude looking pretty frazzled in old camo shorts and a shirt was hitting on women in the store. I'm a dude. As I'm walking down the main aisle, I guess I passed him and interrupted him getting the lady to walk away. So he's following me down the main aisle, tossing quarters at every fixture near me. Eventually I stopped walking as I got to my destination in the store and finally turned around to face this dude. I'm not confrontational by any means, but something just kinda hit a nerve, and just said in my manliest voice I could find, do we have a problem? I guess it worked cause the dude looked super startled, and tried to get away as fast as he could. Ended up reporting it to the manager. I dunno WTF he was doing, but I hope he left and stopped hitting on random women and just being ADK. It was weird.
Almost got stabbed, but I just apologized as if I did something to offend him. The guy didn't know what to do as I walked away. Edit. Thanks everyone for the great stories and awards. To answer the Canadian question, nope. I was just an awkward teenager.
Back in my teenage years, a friend and I had taken a midnight walk to the gas station while stoned, and while on the way back with our chips and sweets, this dude around our age approaches us and demands our money. My friend pulls out his bag of jelly snakes and says, in the creepiest, drawn-out, vaguely threatening pedo voice, would you like a lolly, little boy? The guy just backed away while muttering, what the F?
That reminds me of the time my friend was followed home once. She gets to her front door, turns around and says, can you not? And he just hesitates and walks off.
There's two instances that stick out. 1. This was in 2011. I was about 8.5 months pregnant, driving to an OB/GYN appointment by myself. This man pulled out directly in front of me. Luckily the right lane was empty, so I whipped over, or I would have plowed directly into the back of his big SUV with my little sedan. I was very shaken up because his actions could have killed me and my unborn baby, so I blew my horn. Apparently that angered him because he then followed me for several miles trying to run me off the road. He only stopped when he saw a cop. 2. A few years ago I was in desperate need of a job and a friend helped me get on with his company doing home health. My job was a home health aide where I'd just go house to house, doing light housework and helping the client wash up. Most of these people were out in the boonies where I couldn't get cell service. This one client lived in such a place. He gave me weird vibes from the get-go. I showed up at his requested time, cleaned up his house and helped him wash up. I ask if he needs anything else before I leave. He grabs me quickly and pulls me to him and says, yeah, you can make love to me before you go. This man, who supposedly was too weak to even shower himself, had a very tight grip on me and I couldn't get away. It probably only lasted about 5 to 10 seconds, but it was terrifying. I was alone with this man in his home, no cell service, no neighbors and not even a landline. I was thinking how he could do whatever he want to me and I wouldn't be able to do anything about it.
Was he at least removed from the company's clients?
Actually, no, and it wasn't the first time this had happened. As soon as I got away and got cell service, I called my supervisor and told her. She just sighed and said, oh, George asterisk is at it again. Tsk. Let me know if he tries something like that again. Anyway, your next assignment is waiting, so be sure you get there on time. I quit.
My son and I were at a super crowded farmer's market. I'm thinking he's 10 to 11 at the time. He got ahead of me. I was never more than 20 to 30 feet away and I'm keeping a good eye on him so we don't separate as we meander. I happen to notice a man at a few of the same booths as my son. Then I see him talk to my son. Okay, at this point I'm alarmed and curious. I'm not intervening. I'm big, 6', 3,260, I can tussle, and I have the drop on this guy. If he grabs my son he's getting blindsided by this angry silverback. He keeps following my son and I notice he's starting to look around. I'm guessing to see if anyone is watching. I start to close in a little bit. He still hasn't seen me. At this point it's a fair assumption that he is a predator, but I don't want to make a scene and have him just be some friendly awkward guy. He then starts to put his arm over my son's shoulder. I drop my voice very low and speak very loudly and call my son's name. He whips around thinking he had done something wrong because I had on my meanest sounding dad voice. I'm like 3 feet behind them and towering over both of them. Dude took off. That all transpired in a matter of maybe a minute and a half to 2 minutes. I saw him later getting into a pickup truck with out-of-state plates. The dude had driven in from another state to try to snatch a child, and on that day the universe put my child in front of this monster. While he was never in any grave danger because I caught what was going on, I could have just as easily been had my attention elsewhere in that tiny window.
When I was 5, a man tried to kidnap me from my great-grandma's porch. Still remember seeing her chase him away with a giant stick. Lol. Edit. Added her. Edit 2. Thank you for the awards. I love that my first comment to blow up on Reddit is about how *amazing* and *fierce* my great-grandma is.
Had a similar event happen when I was like 6 or 7, went to the bathroom at a flea market and some dude followed me into the bathroom and locked the door behind him. My stepfather almost broke the door down after rushing over. I remember being in the stall going and the guy trying to push open the door. It was a small stall so I was able to wedge myself between the back of the toilet and the door so he couldn't open it. I didn't think much of it at the time, but thinking back on it now, what a trip.
The other day I had to pee real bad and walked real fast into Quick Check to use the bathroom. The ATM is right there and it was being filled. The guard saw me coming in fast and went for his gun. Luckily I said, "Gotta pee, sorry," and went for the bathroom door.
Imagine getting shot trying to pee.
You came out once you were done and said, "Now I've dealt with that, we can proceed with this robbery."
When I was 10 and my sister was 12, we went door to door in our street selling raffle tickets for our school. There was this one old man, maybe 65 and very grizzled, who we'd never spoken to or met, but we saw him sitting on the porch so went up to him to see if he wanted to buy a ticket. He said yes, and starts writing his name. He then proceeds to tell us about his bitch mother, who got what she deserved. He wrote his name on the raffle ticket, which was clearly fake, because he wrote, Stephen Killman. He kept going over, kill, in black pen, over and over and over as he told us horrible stories about his abusive mother and how he got her back in the end. About 6 months later he was gone and his old house was being demolished. Me and my sister went in to look for stuff, but there was nothing but an old rotary phone. We broke like 4 windows and left. I'll never forget looking at his old hands gripping the pen tracing over the word kill.
This one really sticks out to me, as I haven't had any really scary encounters, most just made me uncomfortable. This one scared me in a different way. I was with my GF at the time, and we were with our 2 friends, who were sisters. We were in our late 20s, walking around an outlet mall. I was about 10 feet behind the 3 of them, so to anyone else it probably didn't look like I was with them. They walked past a bench, and sitting on it was a white guy, in a long black coat, and no other real discernible features. For whatever reason, I specifically noticed him as they were approaching, so I was watching him the entire time. The instant he was out of eyesight of the girls, he holds up a police badge, but kept it very close to his body like he hiding the fact that he was showing it. He faced it towards them and followed them with it the entire time. He put it down after they were about 5 feet away. I'm not sure if he stopped Bevsues he noticed me or not. I know this doesn't sound scary at all, but all I could think was, this dude is building up the courage to pretend he's a police officer to women, and he's going to hurt someone one day. I'm not sure if I got bad vibes from him prior to that or I'm misremembering when I got those vibes, but it seriously creeped me out. I really hope he was just some dorky guy, and wasn't up to no good.
I swear to God, I was watching a series on serial killers, I can't recall which one, and a guy was caught. Turns out he was acting like a police officer, security guard and abducting little boys. They are so lucky that you were there, and that you were most likely the reason he didn't pursue them.
I was friends with a guy back in high school. We lived in the same neighborhood and hung out together often. He ended up owing another guy money for WD. One day I walked to our neighborhood corner store for a soda. As I was walking into the store parking lot, a huge guy came walking out of the store and noticed me. He approached me and said, "You're so-and-so's friend. I've seen you two hanging out. He owes me. Tell me where he lives, I need to talk to him." I replied, "Oh, he lives down toward that way." As I vaguely waved my hand towards the wrong direction away from where my friend actually lived. I then said, "Is that all you need to know?" This must have rubbed him the wrong way. He was silent for a few seconds after my response, making me think the interaction was finished. He waited until I turned my head to walk away, then he sucker punched me in the face, the hardest I have been hit ever, and I've been socked good a few times in my life. I honestly don't know how I wasn't knocked unconscious. However, I was sent reeling into the street from where I was on the sidewalk, in excruciating pain and shock. My vision turned red and purple for a few seconds and I could hear nothing but womp 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 like the teachers in Charlie Brown. Fortunately, no cars were coming as I stumbled into the road. I will say I'm not the fighting type. Taken off guard, terrified and with my head throbbing, I will freely admit I wanted no more, so I got out of there. As I was walking away I heard the guy say, "That's what you get for having a smart-ass mouth. Tell your friend to call me." Looking back at the interaction, I can see where my response could have been taken the wrong way. My choice of words might have come off wrong. I have had issues with social interaction in general my whole life and I'm not good at phrasing, sometimes saying awkward, offensive things unintentionally. Also, I was nervous in the context of the situation and blurted out what I thought would get me out of the conversation quickly. It also could very well be that the person was looking for any excuse to retaliate for the money he was owed and I just happened to be a convenient target. Luckily, I never saw that person again. My friend that owed the money was extremely apologetic when he heard what happened to me and even bought me a big bag of WD as part of saying sorry. Not sure if he ever got confronted by the guy he owed. I stopped hanging out with him not long after that incident. This wasn't the first sketchy thing that happened as a result of hanging out with him, but it finally made me realize that I should choose my friends more carefully. I learned that some people, even with the best intentions, attract drama and trouble, and if you don't want that in your life, it's best to leave them to their life, and keep your distance. Edit. Thanks everyone for the awards and for your feedback. The general consensus I'm seeing is that I shouldn't feel like I did something to deserve what happened to me. I just had some bad luck and ended up crossing the path of a person with ill intent. I will try to take this to heart and not beat myself up over it. After all, I've been beat up enough. Ha. But seriously, thank you for your time and replies.
Greater than some people, even with the best intentions, attract drama and trouble, and if you don't want that in your life, it's best to leave them to their life, and keep your distance. Words to live by.
I was 21 at the time, and not exactly a small dude by any standards. I was at the old bus depot before they closed it down, and this scrawny guy covered in prison tattoos approached me. Me being a friendly guy, I didn't think much of it, until he started trying to get where I lived from me. He gave me bad vibes and the way he was rambling made me think then that he was DGED out or something, so I just tried to dodge the question, but he kept rambling and pushing. The bus came around soon after and I never got on the bus faster. I was honestly surprised he didn't try and follow me on the bus. He honestly gave me bad vibes.
I was like 6. Went to a restaurant with my parents and was on my way to the washroom when this middle-aged woman stopped me, kneeled in front of me and looked me dead in the eyes. Her eyes were spirals. I swear to effing God. I was a kid and didn't know funky eye contacts were a thing, so I thought she was a witch trying to hypnotize me. I started crying, as one does. Closed my eyes to stop the mind control and ran away. Hit my head against a table. Cried some more. This woman really put on spiral eye contacts and said I'm gonna scare the poo out of a kid today. She went out and chose violence. Edit. They look like these, https://ifresh.com/products/halloween-contacts-yellow-red- spiral parenthesis.
Greater than I was like 6. ... Greater than middle-aged woman. She was probably 17.
Back in January of last year, I, at the time 21M, was traveling down the Pacific coast. When I was in San Diego, I decided to go to Black's Beach, which is a clothing-optional beach just north of the city. I was just laying there working on evening out my tan lines when some guy walked by. He stopped maybe 15 feet to my right and started laying out his towel. When he noticed me looking at him, he asked if he was invading my space. I thought it was a little odd how close he was given how empty the beach was that day, but I honestly didn't mind. Or I wouldn't have minded, had he been able to keep his hands off himself. But he sat there in his towel, and for a good 10 minutes or so, he was slowly stroking himself as he looked in my general direction. I decided to go for a walk down to the other end of the beach. When I got down to the end and turned around to start heading back to my stuff, I noticed the guy not too far behind me. He had followed me on my walk. When I got back to my stuff, I started to get dressed. He did the same. He gathered all his stuff before I finished getting my stuff together. He thanked me again for letting him sit up so close to me, made a joke about how he hoped he didn't creep me out, and then he started walking towards the stairs back up to the parking lot. I walked in the opposite direction down the beach, then found a more secluded spot to enjoy the beach a while longer. I guess I never really felt like I was in any danger, but it was an incredibly creepy experience, and I feel like it gave me a better understanding of what women have to deal with way too often.
Drove up solo from California to Seattle super early in my early 20s. First solo road trip. Maybe around 5 a.m. I somehow was on a road parallel to the main highway, just a lot darker. No cars around me for miles. 5 to 10 minutes down this road I'm just patiently waiting to get back on the main highway, when lights just appear maybe 4 car lengths behind me. I stress that there is no way this car could have creeped up on me, and I don't remember seeing any cars parking on the side. It was a 2-lane stretch, so I sped up and merged to the right, and this car followed and sped up. This went on for 20 minutes, no matter what I did. It's still pitch black out, but we finally get back to the highway and this car refuses to let up. I tried to keep the paranoia to a minimum, but I last minute hit an off-ramp to throw this car off. Edit. The stretch of road I was on an area called State of Jefferson. It's a huge area between California and Oregon that wants to secede from California and/or the U.S. Was not an area I wanted to have any early morning human interaction, let alone police.
A homeless guy asked me for change while I was working nights. I told him sorry I don't have any. Very calm he replies, how about we go to an ATM and take some money out before I f***ing kill you. You don't have to be able to run fast, you just have to be able to run faster than the person you're scared of. He didn't end up chasing me, I was too scared to even look back. Edit. I'm Canadian. We don't do guns. Now stop pointing your AR-15s at the screen.
You saying you bolted out of there? When I was in high school, my 2 friends and I were walking on the side of the road to a McDonald's. It was really dark out, but about 20 feet up and on the other side of the road we started to notice a lighter clicking. Like definitely at us. We whispered about it but kept walking hoping to pass by. A homeless man walked pretty quickly out of the dark towards us saying, "Hey. I know you see me." We tried to just keep moving. He said, "I just need some money." We kept walking until he said, "I know y'all don't want to die for some money." We stopped and turned to face him, petrified. I kinda lead the conversation, telling him we'd give him what we had and to just take it easy. We pulled out our wallets and started to give him the few bucks we had, and he sat down on the grass clutching the cash and sobbed about how hungry he was. I had kept a $5 from him, so I pulled it out and gave it to him, saying there's a McDonald's right there and to go get himself something to eat. He just kept crying and praying like, "Lord help me." We decided to leave him there and all I could say was, "God bless you man," and we kept walking. That was a real eye-opener for me. Kind of inverse to that one, I was at a Taco Bell with some friends on a road trip. I went back to the counter to order some more food and this guy approached me. He looks how you imagine the redneck who wants to do weird things looks. And he can't stop stuttering and visibly nervous. He keeps going on about, "Man, something's wrong with my truck, if you could come take a look at it." I tell him I'm probably the least qualified person in here to help him. But he insists, "Man, if you could just take a look at it, IDK, what's wrong with it?" I had no intention of doing so, but I glanced at my friends and they are all shaking their heads. One of them very loudly goes, "My name." "No." And I nodded to him to assure them I understood the situation. When I turned back, the man was halfway out the door and headed back to his car. It still shakes me to think about the reality of this and how easily my life could have been ruined in an instant if I didn't know better. Not sure what the takeaway is here. Some people are just on poo luck and don't feel they have options. Some people want to do terrible, terrible things to others. Always better to assume the latter, I guess.
As a teenager, a homeless person asked me for money. I obliged. He then proceeded to follow me for several blocks saying it wasn't enough and I should give him more. Learned my lesson that day.
I once gave someone some from my wallet. They proceeded to look into my wallet, noticed the bill I was carrying and proceeded to try and put their hand into my wallet stating I could afford to give them more. From then on I just began to say I wasn't carrying my wallet with me.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened to me. I had a small note. I think it was a 10 or a 20 and a 50. I have him the small note but he wanted the big one. It's a moot point now anyway. Haven't carried cash for like a year.
LMAO just saw a thread about how, if you don't always give homeless people money, you're scum, but forget poo, like this happens all the time.
When I was 13, me and my friends were sat in a park during winter, so it was dark, we're just listening to music and having fun. Then this random guy walks into the park with his hands behind his back and just stands near us and doesn't say anything for about a minute. At this point we're all like, what the F? Then this guy just comes out with, do you guys like guns? Keep in mind we're in the UK and people having guns isn't common. At this point we're pooting ourselves. This whole time he's had his hands behind his back, looking like he's concealing something. Then he points his hands at us in the shape of a gun and shouts bang. Then walks off. We all went home after that, tears of joy. In 2018 I was in Bari, southern Italy, for an Erasmus program. So, most warm Tuesday nights, we would go out to a bar called the Motorrad because they had beer pong tournaments. One night a friend of mine and I decided to take our guitars so that we could all have a great time singing with everybody and whatnot. So at the beginning, all our friends gather around, and Italian students also. It was turning out to be an awesome time, but 30 or so minutes into this, two big men with black leather jackets accompanied by two gorgeous women approach our group. They start demanding that we play some Italian songs that, obviously me and my friend had absolutely no f***ing idea about, so we try to explain them that. Even though they understood us by the time we could speak decent Italian, they did not care. They were getting more and more nervous and furious, as the crowd started moving away, and 5 to 10 minutes later it was just them two trying to impress what I hope were their dates, my friend and I. We ended up overhearing some conversations that led us to think they were some sort of mafia guys that had business with that bar, so, even though the fact that they might have been mafia doesn't mean they were going to do anything to us, it didn't help at all either. So at some point one of the guys hands me his phone so that I can try and recognize some song he's got up on YouTube. Instead of just saying names out loud, I quickly pick up it was a simple chord progression, CGMF, and as soon as me and my friends started playing that, they got all happy and started singing the lyrics and dancing with their dates. They got so happy they went into the bar and brought out a round of shots for all 6 of us. At that moment my friend and I look at each other like, I hope this is tequila, cause we know damn well we can't refuse it, so we drank it, hugged it out, and they left with a smile on their faces. We shat ourselves for a moment there.
When I was like 6 or 7 I was in front of a hospital and decided to sit in this bench next to this stranger. Then this stranger literally smacked me in the back of my head. I later found out he was a homeless D addict. Edit. Did not know this was gonna pop off, but basically how I knew he was a D addict as a kid was because like the hospital was on the opposite side of my house and I was kinda well known since my relative in my dad's side owned it. But basically, I saw him butt naked full dong like the 3 days after he was just casually taking a leisurely stroll.
Got stabbed. Wouldn't recommend it.
I have a couple of them from 2 of my workplaces. 1. I was an assistant manager at Domino's at the time, and we had a customer come in saying that he was placing an order online, and the system was overcharging him. This wasn't something that happened, but I asked for the name on his order to look it up. He tells me, and I find nothing. He says that he redeemed his free pizza with his points, but it was still charging him $1. After a minute of back and forth, I find out that he hasn't even placed the order yet. I try to tell him to just place the order, or I can't do anything with it. He becomes a bit more aggressive, talking about how he's getting ripped off. I try to repeat myself and add that I'll just let him keep his dollar, but he cuts me off and becomes more agitated. He's starting to puff himself up at this point and seems like he might get violent, and he's scaring a poor mother and little girl who slink slowly towards the door. I finally just shout over him and tell him he can keep the dollar, but he has to put the order in first because I cannot touch it while it only exists on his phone. He does. I let him keep his damn dollar. He gets his food that I had my employee start in advance. He says he's complaining to corporate and leaves. The mum and girl are still present, and she says she was scared he was going to pull a gun or something and thanks me for getting him out peacefully. I quickly toss in a free order of lava cakes for the both of them and apologize for the scare, and wished for their day improved from that point. They really appreciated the gesture. 2. At a different job, a guy and his wife walk in and ask for change for a $20 bill. I can't open the register without my boss approving, and she's busy. They're apparently in from a bus, and really need this change for whatever reason quickly. Less than 20 seconds pass and this dude gets pissed and starts shouting at me. I'm not really fazed by this, I'm used to taking abuse from customers. I start to think I might need to call the cops on this guy, and then he says, still less than 2 minutes after meeting, "You're lucky I can't bring my gun to Texas, or I'd shoot you right now." His wife realizes it's getting bad, and shuts him up. They take their $20 bill and leave without change.
I, a petite and short female, was on the subway platform, walking and texting on my phone, when a huge man just barrels into me and keeps walking without stopping. Incredulous, I stared at him walking away until he looks back and sees me staring. At this point, he gets visibly angry and storms towards me. It was the fastest "get the F out of there" reaction I've ever had. All of this happened in less than a minute and the platform wasn't crowded for him to do that by accident.
I've had this, though I'm a 6'2" guy, so it's definitely less dangerous. It's like their brain has just decided they want to fight but can't quite justify randomly starting on someone. To them, you being angry at them is enough justification, even if they essentially force the situation anyway.
The stranger didn't scare me, but a couple of weeks ago I went for a walk with my kid through the village we live near and we crossed over a level crossing. There was a young chap stood on the tracks. I thought, that's not right, as we walked past him to the other side. All of a sudden, the barriers lowered and the alarm sounded. I turned back towards the chap on the tracks who began to quiver. I knew what was about to happen, so I started to panic. I screamed and shouted at him. He didn't react. I didn't want to see what was about to happen, and I certainly didn't want my 8-yo to see. I could hear the train coming and had to act. I jumped over the barrier intending to tackle him out of the way. Thankfully, as I approached him, he moved out of the way and slumped on an electrical box that powers the barrier trackside. The train came towards us and I didn't have time to jump back over to safety, so I turned back toward the barrier and leant against them as the train passed. The barriers raised and walked to safety to my kid. The barriers lowered again with him still trackside. Thankfully, someone had called the police, who were approaching and were there in seconds. I asked the police if I could carry on my way as I was with my kid, and they let me do so. But wow, can't get the image of him standing on the tracks out of my head.
Thank you for watching. We upload new videos every day, so be sure to come back for more fun. Please consider liking and subscribing if you enjoyed the video.